buyer trying to get a better number before you close, or the seller who just got the call, there's a negotiating tactic called retrading, and almost nobody explains how it actually works from both sides of the table. I've been in the room on both sides. Here's exactly what happens, why it works, and how it usually ends. Retrading is when a buyer agrees to a price and terms in your letter of intent or purchase agreement. Then, often at the end of due diligence, they try to negotiate down, not because the business has changed, but because they think that you're now too invested and tired to walk away. There's usually a story attached to it. A quality of earnings review finds some adjustment that lowers your trailing profit, and a typical multiple, even a small adjustment, can mean a six-figure price cut. Or the working capital gets recalculated in the buyer's favor right before close. Sometimes there is a real issue worth discussing, and sometimes it's simply a test to see if you'll cave. To be clear, not every price conversation after an LOI is retrading. If due diligence turns something up that's real, sales that have actually declined since the offer was made, or a higher accounts receivables needs, that's not a tactic, that's due diligence doing its job. You as the buyer deserve to pay a price that reflects the actual business, and I'll tell my sellers that from the very beginning. So the whole point of making an offer is that you've already done enough work to be reasonably confident in that number. Retrading is different. It's usually the seller's sunk cost against them for a discount that isn't backed by anything that's actually changed. Here's why it's so effective. By the time it happens, the seller is emotionally checked in. The seller and buyer have met. They've been meeting for due diligence meetings every week for the past 4 weeks. The deal feels 90% done. You've told your spouse, maybe you've started planning what's next, and you're terrified that if you push back, the buyer will walk and you're going to have to start from zero. So that fear is what gives the buyer leverage, not the financials, not the market, your fear of losing the deal. Let me give you a real example. I had a seller who owned the building. He was the landlord. The rent was agreed on in writing long before we got anywhere near closing. The buyer knew exactly what the rent was going to be when he made his offer. At the very end of due diligence, he came back and he tried to renegotiate the rent anyway. Then he came back on the accounts receivables number, an amount that we'd already agreed on. Then another item, then another. It wasn't one legitimate finding. It was a long list of things he already knew about, dressed up like new discoveries. That's not due diligence turning up something real. That's retrading, one item at a time, hoping that we'd get tired of saying no. A string of small asks added up to one big retrade. But we didn't get tired. My seller and I walked away from that buyer and we went straight to the second offer we already had in hand. That deal closed. The retrading one never had a chance. So here's how you take leverage back before it ever gets to that point. First, multiple offers before you ever sign a purchase agreement. A seller with one interested buyer, they have no leverage. A seller with three has all of it because now the retrading buyer knows that you have somewhere else to go. Number two, get your financials clean before you go to market. Quality of earnings issues that surface during due diligence are often things a good quality of earnings could have addressed months earlier. If there's nothing to discover, there's nothing to retrade on. Q of E reports, especially on deals over 5 million, they're worth having done by the seller. They can be pricey, but worth it so that you're confident in your numbers. Number three, tight LOI language. A vague LOI or purchase agreement gives a buyer room to renegotiate almost anything. A specific one, clear purchase price, clearly defined working capital target, clear conditions that can and can't retrigger repricing, closes the door before it opens. Number four, a defined exclusivity period, not an open-ended one. I tend to have deals with 30 days of exclusivity with no automatic extension. Buyers who ask for endless extensions are often buying themselves time to build a case for a lower number, not time to close. And then finally, number five, and this is the one that most sellers can't do for themselves, you need someone in the room who can credibly say no. A broker who folds the moment a buyer pushes isn't protecting you, they're protecting their commission. A broker willing to walk a buyer back to the table or even walk away entirely is the difference between a retrade succeeding and a retrade going nowhere. The right broker can say no on your behalf. This is exactly why I only take listings that I'm confident that I can sell. and why I run most deals towards multiple offers instead of banking on just one buyer. It's a lot harder to retrade someone who has options. And if you're the buyer watching this, to be fair on your side, if something real turns up during due diligence, bring it forward. Good sellers and good brokers will work with you on a legitimate number. What doesn't work and what usually costs you the deal instead of the discount is manufacturing a reason or leaning on a seller's sunk cost when nothing has actually changed. The buyers who close the best deals, they aren't the ones who are trying to squeeze a number down at the finish line. They're the ones who built trust early enough that they've never had to. If you're close to an exit, subscribe. This is where I post what most sellers never get told until it's too late. Don't forget to hit subscribe. We talk every week about selling businesses, increasing your profit, and setting you up for retirement or your next move.